Welcome to the November user group, last user group for the year. We're excited to have you with us. We've got a little bit to get through today, probably jumping a little bit out between slides and Eloqua. Obviously, have a look at the new Eloqua. So let's jump in. Thanks again for making some time to be with us today, everybody. So my name is Derek Bell, and I'm the Director of Customer Success and Marketing at Marketing Cube. And helping me on the line today, we have Matt Hemsley, who's our marketing manager, and Jason O'Donnell, one of our account directors as well. So these two geniuses are very well equipped to assist you with any questions. Just that sometimes while I'm presenting, it's hard to keep track of. Well, we all know this, right? 2020 is delivered. We should all be webinar experts by now. So I'll leave you to use the Q&A or the chat, and the guys will be able to help you as we move through. And often we'll share those with everybody anyway, so that's cool. Okay, so let's have a look at the agenda for today. And managing your Eloqua campaigns over the holiday period was kind of the number one task. Looking at kind of makes sense while we're doing that to have a little bit of look at maybe some housekeeping. What could we do over the holiday period if it is a little bit quiet for some of us? I appreciate depending on where you are in the world. Certainly here in the Southern Hemisphere, this is summer, so we take our 4 to 6 week holidays around this time. Some teams are running on reduced numbers, etc. during that period. Obviously, in the Northern Hemisphere, you do that in June, July. The same principles apply. So I thought it would be worthwhile to have a look, given it's the end of the calendar year at least. Trying to find end of financial year for everybody is so different. So we touch on this one usually around this time of the year and usually around the June, July period as well. Just some fundamentals to think about. And we'll jump into insight and also have a look at some of the dashboards in Eloqua as well to give you an idea of what's going on there. And then we'll also take a look at the release 20D, which everybody has now. It's active and everybody's playing with it. So you've seen it, but we'll just recap on a few things for you as well. Alrighty, so what are some of the considerations and things that we should be thinking about when it comes to holiday period? So if there's any extended time when you feel that there may be a reduced ability to potentially respond at the same speed that you would during normal business hours, it's probably worthwhile to have a think about some of your always on type of campaigns that potentially give promises of you'll hear from us within 4 business hours, etc. Is that still realistic over the holiday period? Let's have a look at a few or a list of some suggestions and ideas. The first one is to review the always on campaigns. Now, this one's been interesting. We actually did this. Well, obviously everybody's world changed around February, March this year. I started to think, I think it was probably not until April. I probably should have thought about it earlier. But in April, I was thinking, well, hang on a minute, we've got these always on campaigns. For example, the main one was people subscribing to our events. Now, of course, all of our event comms, the always on event comms, so subscription, confirmation, emails, etc., spoke a lot about in-person events and not too much about webinars. So that had to change. So what we actually did was not just change the asset, we created a new asset. So now we've kind of got a COVID version, a non-COVID version of that. Chances are at the end of this whole exercise, we'll end up with a third, more inclusive version. It's about just changing those commitments, because in that confirmation email, once people subscribe to our events, we talked very much about we look forward to seeing you at our next in-person event. We do a range of things, and we had photos of events with people around tables and having lunch or dinner, and obviously it just made no sense during the last sort of 8-9 months of 2020. So that's what we're talking about in relation to reviewing some of these things. And it's always a good idea, regardless of the holiday period, to go back and review some of those always on communications, because the thing is, this is part of the joy of automation, right? You can set up all these things and they just kind of work away. However, if those emails were written in 1945, it's probably time to go back and have a look and just revisit and make sure they're relevant, that they're still offering the right things, that the links in those emails that go to your website, for instance, are those pages still there? All those sorts of things. So this is sort of a mix of holiday, but also housekeeping suggestions as well. Then potentially looking at your website, are there parts or sections of your website that potentially talk to customers in the context of immediacy and right now, and we'll be back to you today, etc., making those sort of commitments. So putting a holiday filter over that again, should some of that copy be slightly amended potentially, just so it's a little bit more relevant, or maybe remove some of the hard commitments in relation to hours, etc., from a service level agreement or SLAs from the website, maybe for that period. Just something so you're not over promising and under delivering on the service levels. The next one is probably not super. Well, I found there was only probably literally 2 or 3 campaigns or forms that I noticed when I had a closer look at it. I realized, well, actually, hang on a minute, during this period, we probably want to either pause. Now, with Eloqua, there is no pause function, where it's either an active campaign or it's not. It's one or the other. So things like your nurturing campaign, if you think about the work that you put into a lead nurturing campaign where you're taking people through a journey, certainly here in the Southern Hemisphere over the holiday period, people pretty much check out in the middle of December, and depending on the business and the organization, realistically are not really back on deck until after Australia Day, so until after the 26th of January. So that kind of gives you nearly a sort of 6-7 week period where maybe your nurturing campaigns are going to have a really hard time getting any cut through and being effective, and potentially just not be they'll be received obviously, but not even opened. So is there merit in thinking about potentially deactivating a campaign, keeping in mind, of course, that once you reactivate the campaign, everything pretty much picks up where it left off. So people don't go back to the beginning. It'll pretty much pick up where they left off. The only thing you have to factor in is the wait steps. So if you've got a wait step on your canvas that is configured for, say, wait 2 weeks, and you decide in the middle of December, okay, let's deactivate the campaign, that person may have been halfway through, so a week into their 2-week wait step. Now, when you reactivate the campaign, that wait step will commence at 0. So they'll now have to wait 2 weeks to move through that wait step before they get the next email. People don't move back up the canvas, so please don't be concerned about that. That doesn't happen. So remember, Eloqua will never send the same email to the same person twice. So you've got those fundamentals to remember. But that's the only real consideration for you to think about. So if you feel there's merit in potentially pausing some nurturing campaigns over the holiday period, it's probably a good idea, something to think about. And the last one is kind of as I was talking to earlier in relation to the language used. Specifically, if you're making commitments from a service level agreement in some of those emails, you might want to just make sure that the customer service team or the call center team, that all makes sense, that we've got bums on seats and people able to manage and receive those calls, inquiries, and respond in the timeframes that you're talking about. So looking at things from a housekeeping point of view, a little bit similar to what we've just talked about, not too different, but slightly different. The housekeeping suggestion is one where we would encourage you to have a think about those tasks that probably should be done a little bit more regularly in Eloqua, but are maybe not done because of general busyness. So that's what we talk about, possible downtime. Not everyone has downtime over this period, but possible downtime. And maybe it's time to do a little bit of filing and maybe taking advantage of some of the new features that we've seen added to Eloqua this year, like the archive feature. So we'll talk about that in a bit more detail too, so you can understand that one. Some of the things that I would encourage you to think about, and the big one has a commercial impact because the less contacts you have in Eloqua, the less cost there is to the business when it comes to renewals. So getting rid of hard bounces. Remember, a hard bounce in Eloqua is an email address that has been rejected by the server, as in the recipient server. So a hard bounce, once it's been tagged as such in Eloqua will never allow you to email that person again. So they serve no purpose. They're like a dusty old seller. They're just taking up space. So we need to get them out of Eloqua. Okay, so you'll find all the details you need on how to do that in the Help Center. If you have any questions, of course, please reach out to us. Happy to help. So getting your hard bounces out of Eloqua is a good thing. I try and do it on a regular basis, about every 3 months. And at Little Old Marketing Cube, obviously our databases are quite a bit smaller than some of you guys. but it's a two-pronged process. When there's a CRM involved, you can remove them from Eloqua, that's fine, but the integration, when it kicks in the next 15 minutes or whatever it is, will simply bring them all back into Eloqua. So you need to obviously be working either with your CRM administrator, or maybe you are also able to do that sort of thing within the CRM, and you can do it as one simple step. So again, if you have any questions on that one, just let us know. We've got some, obviously the support team can assist you in some documentation. Again, that might help as well. The other one to think about, and this is probably a new behavior for Eloqua users, is the ability to archive some of your assets. So earlier this year, you saw that you had the ability to archive forms. You can now also archive email as well as a release 20D. So that's something to think about. Okay, this is what I wanted to do. This is, okay, so here's the breakdown, just so you've got some clarity in relation to what this archive function means. Now, you might notice that the archive function appears when you're looking at the Eloqua screen. In fact, let's just jump in here quickly and I'll show you where it is. Welcome to the new Eloqua. I'm sure you've all seen it as well. But right here is the archive function. So if we click on archive, now this is the email, this has just arrived with the release 20D. So you can see we at Marketing Cube haven't done any archiving as yet either, or either as yet. So let me just go back and find something that's really old. Here we go, 2013. This is just a very random email. And so you can right click on that email and then archive it. So archiving an asset makes it unavailable for future use, which is great. Are you sure? Yes, I am. Archive the asset. So now you get a confirmation tick at the top of the screen, go to archive, and there it is. But let's go back to that slide. Okay, so what does it really mean? So archived emails will not display and engage. Good to know. Archived emails in an active campaign will send as expected. So if maybe you're not really clear on where it is or what it's doing, if the email is in an active campaign, that's fine. It'll still perform and function as you would expect in the context of that campaign. So you can then choose to include or exclude archived assets from reports in Insight. And an email is archived, that should be in italics. And is archived attribute is available in Eloqua Insight. So from Insight, you have all sorts of variables that you can add, obviously, when you're applying filters. And there's a new attribute called is archived. Okay, so you'll be able to see that. Now, looking at forms, so forms do not appear in regular search results or in chooser screens, which is great. Archive forms cannot be edited, copied, renamed, or added to new campaigns. That's particularly exciting, or to landing pages as well. So forms must be unarchived first, and archive forms will continue to function as expected. Now, in relation to who can unarchive things, I've got a note over here. So users that have the delete permission for a form are able to archive and archive it. So if today you're able to delete an email from Eloqua, then you'll also be able to unarchive things. That really is an awkward word, isn't it? But users without the delete or archive permission will only see read-only access for archived forms. So they'll be able to see that they're archived, but that's it. They won't be able to do anything else about it. So why is this a good thing? Look, it's a really good thing. If you've only been using Eloqua for a couple of years, yeah, you're kind of like, okay, that's great. If you've been using Eloqua for 5 or 10 years, your Eloqua instance and your folders and form structure or folder structures will be filled with assets. And a good portion of those assets are potentially never to be used again, or they're kind of so old that even from a reporting point of view, there's not much value. So to make it easier for the user community, as in your Eloqua user community, archiving some of these assets is probably a really good thing to do. As you said, as you saw there, though, in relation to if you do archive something that happens to be in an active campaign, it doesn't matter. Email campaign will continue to function as you would expect it to. So no need to stress or worry on that particular point. Now let me just have a look here. It looks like there are a couple of questions. Okay, no, we're all good, I think. Oh, here we go. Talia, when you archive a form or email, will you still be able to pull? Yeah, okay, so yeah, good question. So as we said here, so in Insight, yes, you'll be able to report on them. So you can choose to include or exclude archived assets from reports in Insight. So just to emphasize that. And then should you choose to include those archived assets in Insight, there is an attribute that you can add which will show you that that particular asset is in fact archived. So really helpful information to help you manage the data a bit better and just to manage those assets a lot better. So let's have a look at Insight. I wanted to try and jump in and have spend some time in Insight just to show you a few examples of how we do things and provide some suggestions, essentially. Hopefully you noticed now we've gone to a very Australian Southern Hemisphere Christmas photo. On the beach with a surfboard, not me, by the way. I'd be more inclined to probably be behind the camera taking the photo, but yeah, always love to be at the beach over Christmas. All right, so I was trying to think of what's a good way to look at this from a data point of view and really trying to think through what's the benefit, because we can pull a mountain of reports. Often our reports are very focused on a campaign, and I noticed that a lot of customers want to then pull reports that are very focused on assets, so right down to the email level, for example, versus maybe up at the campaign level. So what I'm going to show you today is probably the most common report that we see people extract from Eloqua, but let's have a close look and see what that is. So if we're looking at trying to review campaign performance, because the commitment we made in the agenda was to look at the period for this year, so 2020 versus say 2019. And it really is as simple as these 5 steps that you can see here on the screen. So it's going to be about, first of all, getting into Insight. You can do all of this as a report user or an analyzer user within Insight, and I'll show you the difference once we get in there. You can then locate the campaign analysis overview report, configure the reports for the last 12 months, and so just applying the date parameters. Configure your second report for the 12-month period prior, and then essentially just export both of them to Excel if you wanted to do that. Now, once you go through the process of extracting them, looking at them, potentially customizing those Excel reports a little bit, if you sort of then get it down to a point where, well, this is what we really want to see in the report, we don't want to see everything that Eloqua gave us in that report, well, then you can go talk to your administrator and customize a report. So go again into campaign analysis overview report and have your administrator remove the data that is not needed, potentially add data that you wanted to see, and then go from there. This is looking at Insight. And once you access the different reports, it's the campaign analysis overview report that is quite helpful. Now, just a couple of other points before we jump in. The analysis overview construct is applied to just about everything. There are analysis overview reports for emails, for forms, for campaigns, for contacts, and so many more. And I'll show them. We'll log in here in a second. I'll show you that there's so many to choose from. And then you just basically go through and repeat the process. So let's have a look. Oh, and the final point before we jump in is thinking about dashboards versus Insight. And why would I use one versus the other? What we're going to do today is we're going to have a look at Insight, and I'll quickly jump back and show you dashboards. That's actually a dashboard. It's a live dash or live dash. I extracted that yesterday, looking at the last 12 months to date for Marketing Cube and what we've been up to and different things. And you can see there's certainly some patterns developing there. And the big spike that you can see here is March, which funnily enough, as I look at customers' data, everybody seems to have this huge spike in March of outbound activity. So it was a busy period for sure. So let's jump in and have a look. So we're going to go to Insight at the top here. But once Insight opens, you'll be familiar with the screen. And what we'll do is we'll focus first of all on the campaign analysis overview report. I might just zoom in there a little bit, make that a bit easier for you to see. So, first of all, let me show you this. So this is the search screen up here. So if you type in analysis overview and hit return on your keyboard, Eloqua Insight will return with every single report that contains that information. So you can see there's everything by landing pages, and not just by landing pages, but by page views, total visitors. If you've got CRM integration, IDs, email analysis. And so again, email analysis, existing visitor click-throughs, new visitors, possible forwards, blah, 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 bounce backs, click-throughs, delivered. The list just goes on. So what I find, you'll see here, there's like a whole ton of these, right? But the thing is, when you go to the home screen, if you limit what you're doing to just say clicking on email here in the bottom right-hand corner, this list feels a bit shorter. Okay, so sometimes doing a bit of a search on some keywords can reveal a few little hidden treasures. But let's go back to the home screen, and I'm going to click on campaigns. And the analysis overview, you can see I've made that a favorite, and making it a favorite is a function. You can click on the more button there, and you can see that it's set up as a favorite. So I click on open. And the first thing we want to do is provide a date range parameter. So I'm going to remove the construct of the last 14, 21, or 30 days, whichever it is. And then in here, now just to make life easier and faster, I'm just going to choose the, what are we doing? So 07, I'm just going to do from the 1st of July, just so there's not so much data that needs to be pulled back. And we'll make that, let's say, the 9th first. Now, if you choose nothing here, which is generally what you want to do, you want to choose nothing here, because what Eloqua will do is it will return every single campaign that had a start date or end date, or had a person interact with some of your content within that particular date range. Okay. Now, for your larger organizations, the other thing that you can do is come in here. So if you wanted to, if yourself and maybe 2 or 3 of your colleagues do all of the relevant campaigns for your organization, then what you can do is actually apply another filter on top of the date range, which is just your team. So if there's 2 or 3 in your team and you only want to look at your team's campaigns, then you can do that by selecting the user who would have created those particular campaigns. So I'm going to say, Matt and Derek, and then okay, keeping in mind following the examples of the date format. So US format, month, day and year. Now, if you're wondering whether or not your user access to Insight is either a report user or an analyzer user, let me show you exactly how you can tell that. Once you get to this particular screen, which is your report results, if you then scroll down, if you see the edit button in the bottom left-hand corner, then you're an analyzer user. So that's the highest level of access that you've got within the platform. Okay. So that's what the data looks like. You can see you can do a little bit of dragging and dropping and move things around should you want to, and adjust columns. But if you actually want to manipulate and hide and remove columns and potentially add additional columns, then you need to click on the edit button. And then from there, we'll move into the build mode. Okay, so first thing to understand is this occurs in 3 tabs. So criteria, results, and prompts. These are the 2 that you would probably use the most. Now, I found something the other day, or I had to help a customer the other day with something that was irritating them. So if you've exported a lot of Insight reports, you'll notice that the Excel file that it produces, if we look at it from column A, B, C, and D, for instance, in column A, if it's an email report or campaign, you'll list the campaign. And what it does, it merges a whole bunch of those cells, because then there's individual line items next to it in the Excel document. Now, if you're just simply looking at that particular report for whatever reason, then that's fine. It kind of makes sense. However, as soon as you want to start doing analysis within Excel, those merged cells are an absolute nightmare. And so then people spend way too long going through and unmerging all those cells, taking the value, and look, it's a nightmare. There is a way you can fix that. So you can actually fix it before you get it out into Excel. So from the edit area under criteria, we access, these are the columns that existed in the report, and these are the column headings that you would see in Excel. So by clicking on here and then down to column properties, this pops up, and specifically it's column format. So this is what I mean. I'm hoping you can see that. Let me zoom in a bit, make sure. So this is an example from Excel. So you've got a merge cell that then has 2 rows feeding out of it, and that's the default. However, if you want to change it to repeat, which makes it so much easier to then do your analysis in Excel, then that's going to give you every single row will be populated and there are no merge cells. So much easier to build charts, do calculations, add things up, all that sort of stuff. So hopefully that is helpful for you. Now, depending on the construct, you might need to go through and adjust that on each column. You'll notice it remembers where you were, so you don't have to go back to the tab again, which is nice. Campaign members, I can't remember how far it goes. Yeah, now once you get over here, if that's already the default set in that area. So it's just this initial section from a campaign point of view. So if I click on results, I can then see what the report's going to look like based on the changes that I just made using the criteria section. So you can see it's retrieving the data. Please wait. I'm hoping this is as riveting as it is for you as it is for me, but there you go. So now you can see we've got individual lines or rows. And so should that then be exported out to Excel, I've got all the information I need. What you're actually reporting on is not the campaigns that went out the door in that time frame. What you're reporting on is people's engagement with any of your assets or any of your campaigns within that time frame. So you might have had a campaign that launched in January this year and concluded in February. That might have sent out 7 or 8 emails. However, if somebody in July or August clicked on any of those assets and opened any of those emails because they just never got to them, they were buried in their inbox, then that behavior will be recorded as campaign activity and will be shown here on your report. So that's a really important thing to understand. Some customers, some Eloqua users will pull a report within a date frame and then get stressed because there's campaign appearing in there that's not within the date range that they selected. That's not what Eloqua is giving you. What it's giving you is the engagement of people that you've communicated with within the date range that you've selected. And it's based on whatever email they clicked on, whichever campaign was running in. Earlier in the year. It's all about that particular date range and the person's behavior, not your outbound campaigns. All right, so that's how you can get in and play and manipulate with those reports. Now, the other one that is really popular, of course, is the email report, email analysis overview. You'll see again, I've got that one highlighted there. So if I'm trying to do analysis over, actually, let's just use this one for last 30 days, just to speed things up a little bit. So I'm going to say the last 30 days, let's pretend that's the last 12 months. Great question from Robert Connor. And Robert, you know I've got no hair under this. I've been in IT for a long time. This is probably one of my single biggest bugbears about US software companies. It's all American date time. So no, it cannot be changed to Australian date time. It's all in American format. All right, so we've set the last 30 days and I'm going to say okay. And now we're looking just at emails. And you'll see we've got individual rows here. There are no merged cells in this particular report, which is good. So I'm going to click on export in the bottom left-hand corner. I'm going to go straight to Excel and have that open. So when you're working from Excel, when you're working from Insight, unlike Eloqua, the file will be available for you immediately. So it's not going to send you an email that you then need to access. And we'll have a close look at what that data looks like. And generally what happens in these examples, you need to sort of play with it for a little while, work out which of the columns are of most interest to you and most valuable to you as an organization, and then go in and produce a custom report on what it is that you need. So this is last 30 days, like so. Then I'm just go back home again and back into email. And we go back into the analysis report. So now I want to look at the period previous to the last 30 days. So I probably need to get a calendar in front of me to make this happen. So it would be, let's go back, September 24th to October 24th. All right, and say okay. There it is. So again, I click on export straight to Excel. I generally find what is the easiest to do. While it dumps it all in a second file, I'll just copy the lot and paste it into here. So I've just got one. So I've just got one file essentially. So use 30-day period. Does that make sense? There we go. Okay, so now at least we've got everything in the same sheet. I want to make sure I've always got my master data that came out of Excel over here. So my third worksheet. But essentially what I'm trying to do is get it into a state where I can identify the last 30 days and then start to do some overall analysis, start applying filters, adjusting what I'm doing, all of that fun stuff. You can't read any of that, I'm sure. Zoom in a bit. So now I've got everything tied in together. So the benefit of keeping my master, which is what I've not done, is to be able to go back, look at totals, etc., and do the comparisons. But then once you're in here now, you can apply filters, obviously, start to sort things out, and it probably gets a little bit easier to get a bit of a finger on what it is you're trying to do and to do that analysis. So the email, obviously, this level of granularity, I've just chosen, what was it, like last 30 days and previous. So, and you can already see in that period for Marketing Cube, that resulting in, 140 or 139 assets. You can imagine over a 12-month period, it can obviously get quite extensive. So you're going to end up with a lot of data to play with. But I find helpful then to start looking at some of the unique values that are listed. So things like, unique form submissions, unique click-through rates, those sorts of things. And then you can start to do some overall comparisons, look at averages and all that sort of fun stuff as well. So we put them all together. Some of them, there's been no such behavior, but using your Excel capability, look at the average, unique click-throughs, etc. And then what I tend to do is, let's say, I don't know, if that's the above average, then I would highlight them in green, and below average, once I've calculated whatever they are, highlight those potentially in red. The reason I do that is I then find, besides the fact that it actually looks very festive, which wasn't the intent, then when I start to do sort things, I can identify emails very quickly that are high performing, low performing. Some may have really high open rates, but then are very low unique click-through rates, for example. So you don't want to make decisions in isolation just because something had a great open rate. It needs to be balanced with, well, what was the content in that email? Was there a bold call to action? That sort of stuff. And so I find doing that analysis and a bit of color coding, positives and negatives, then when I start to look across the Excel spreadsheet, I can very quickly identify those emails that are overall performing quite well, not just based on one particular statistic. So that's just one way to do it. There are numerous ways, and you will probably have your own way of doing it. But today, what we just want to try and give you some ideas around was how to do a little bit of that analysis. Now, because if you go back into Eloqua, another part of Eloqua that you can look at are the dashboards. And so the dashboards are another way that you can view things. You can't do a direct comparison, but you can, if we look at, say, campaign analysis overview, you can select a date range. So you can say last week, last month, etc. Or if we say custom, we can in fact go back to whatever works for us. So if we go back to 2018 and let's say November 24th through till today and apply, it's going to show me all of my campaign types, obviously. This is probably a little bit way too granular to look at it from a day. So maybe let's look at month or even potentially a quarter. And so then as you start to look from the bottom here, you can start to identify, so Q1 19 versus Q1 20. So we can see from Q1 19 to Q1 20, Marketing Cube, there was obviously a significant lift in outbound campaigns, which appears to have had a correlation of increased engagement. So the inbound activity, remember, is the clicks, opens, website visits, form submissions. These are all considered inbound activities. So this top graph, the outbound activity, this is you essentially pushing emails out the door. And if you've got some categorization in place with your campaign types, product and region, then this becomes helpful and a little bit more insightful. You can see then for Q2, we actually upped we lowered the ante a little bit. So there's a little bit less activity from us going out the door. However, there was increased activity. So the big winner there seems to probably be the user group. Yeah. So the user group seems to have probably been the big push there. So there's more engagement, etc. So again, you can break it down by month if you want to. And as I said, it's really interesting. This March period that you can see, which is clearly a spike from our point of view in outbound, was very much the same for many of our customers, very many. So, and then things have sort of got back into a little bit more normal as we sort of head into the latter half of the year. Then, of course, you've got all the information listed below. Of course, depending on how you've got your platform configured, these campaign fields can actually be really quite helpful in looking to make sure that you've got a consistent mix. If you're using the product field category for products, making sure there's a consistent feel across that period as well, and that no one particular product is being lost. What happened here is we decided to remove the abbreviations of OMC. So in our world, for the moment, the red and the purple is in fact the same as you move through. So that's another way to have a look at sort of the last 2 years next to each other. It's obviously much faster than Insight, but with Insight, you'll be able to go a lot more granular and get into quite a bit more detail at the same time. What's new and what's changed? So there's a lot that's new and a lot that's changed. Well, not really, there's a lot that's changed, but certainly there's been a lot of change over 2020. What I wanted to show you as well, for those of you that use topliners, there's a specific area of topliners that you can go into called Eloqua Insiders. So what I wanted to do is, instead of just throwing up a slide here in front of you and showing you all those different things, let me show you how to find that information in topliners. So let's go. So topliners here, obviously you'll need to be logged in. Now there is a group in topliners, and you'll notice the group area at the top of the screen there. So groups, and so I have my groups, and one of them is Eloqua Insiders. If you don't see that under your login, what you need to do is search for Eloqua Insiders, and then you'll need to apply to join that particular group. You'll notice down the bottom here, there are other groups that topliners are suggesting I might be interested in, and so there's a big join button next to it. So they'll just need to validate you as a current Eloqua customer in order to access Insiders. And then once you get into Insiders, it's pretty much just a list of updates and things to think about and to be aware of. So the one I wanted to focus on was here, the 20D release information and briefing. So some of you may have been in here already. And so typically the format is that Jody Mooney from Oracle, who is the group project manager for CX Marketing Eloqua, Jody and her team will put together a sort of a highlights list, as she calls it right there, showing you what's kind of going on, the new Zoom app, which we promised to cover. Some more information on that one for you. Obviously, they're showcasing the new look and feel, so I hope you're enjoying that. And then here you'll also find details about the releases and when those releases are unfolding. You got to you got to kind of wonder, is scheduling anything for Friday the 13th ever a good idea? But we're on pod one and everything went swimmingly, so not a bad thing. Now, what I wanted to show you down here, though, in this area is the additional resources section, and specifically a link called Complete New Feature Summary for 20D. So if I click on that, it's actually going to take me to another area of, this is actually outside of Topliners, I think. It's not in Topliners per se, but you'll see all the releases down the left-hand side, and then a summary of all the information. Now, again, it's probably a bit difficult for you to see. Read that a little bit better. So document history, overview, and then it goes kind of into quite a bit of detail. So the previous area of Topliners just gives you some nice sort of marketing spin, I suppose. If you want to get into the detail as to what's actually happening, then you can come in here and you'll get quite a bit of information. So, for instance, with the new account level reports that have been available in Insight, you're now able to add additional attributes. So attributes are all the bits and pieces that help you make up your report and that you can filter on. So being able to divide those account reports by email group, for example, could be quite helpful. Also, day of week and hour becomes quite interesting. So, so unless you come in and have a look at these things, or obviously through the user group, we try and share these things with you as well, then you might miss out. Ongoing changes for those of you that are using Salesforce as your CRM platform and integrating with Eloqua. So again, quite a bit of detail there into exactly what's changing and happening, which is good news. The archiving of emails became available for release 20D. So we covered that a little bit already, which is good. You can see there they've got that italicized, which I failed to do. The new look and feel. So this is just so you're crystal clear on what's happening. This is sort of the first stage in the look and feel, is what I understand. So it's the login screen, the main navigation menus, the hamburger menu, and basically the My Eloqua homepage. My understanding is that that will develop further. So once we get into February, we'll see more changes from a cosmetic and interface point of view. So new look and feel. Then you sort of get down here. So this is definitely for the geeks in the room, understanding more about API updates, bulk APIs, etc., those sorts of things. So all of that information is available. And you can see here, we can go back and have a look at the previous releases. So we can go back to 20C, etc. And it was interesting when I had a look at this yesterday, I realized it's been a big year. There's been a lot of enhancements, a lot of additions, new features released. I mean, the product we're using today in November is quite a bit different to the product that we were using in January. Now, if you don't feel like you're experiencing that the same, then there are things potentially maybe you're not using that you could be. You're not maximizing potentially the functions that are available to you. So let's have a look and let's see where there's some super cool things in here that really could be maybe saving time and helping you do things a little bit faster and a little bit more automated, which is always part of the plan. Now, we did promise to give you an update on Zoom, and this is the information that I've literally pulled from that center within Eloqua. Now, the challenge I found, though, was I went off to the help center to find the app and have a look at the information, and it said it was still in controlled availability. And so then I went over to the Eloqua Marketplace, which is where you typically go to download apps for Eloqua. And it was nowhere to be found. All I could find was the old 2016 app, which I assume is 1.0, and what we're waiting on is 2.0. So I raised a service request with Oracle. They came back and just confirmed that they expect to be available, that is 2.0, the new Zoom app, to be available within the next couple of weeks. There's just been some delays internally, I believe, because I think this one is developed by Zoom. So we'll wait to see. We'll keep you posted as soon as many of you we're aware who are using Zoom. But as soon as we know that that's available, we might do a quick update to those of you that we know are using Zoom on your devices. Now, I told you in the email that we'd also tell you about a little Zoom project that we've been working on at Marketing Cube. Out of all the integration apps that are available for the various webinars, GoToWebinar, etc., WebEx even, who else? ReadyTalk. The Zoom app was nothing spectacular. It was a very, so 1.0 that is, it was a very rudimentary app. And some of you had experienced some glitches with data validation. So like checking who'd actually attended a webinar, etc. So we had felt some of those same pain points because, as you know, we use Zoom because we love the Zoom experience from your point of view. So you, as the people attending the webinar, we feel and love that Zoom experience that you're having, but we just felt there was some work that needed to be done from Zoom to Eloqua. And so instead of complaining about it, we got onto it. Thomas, who's one of our senior developers within the team, has been working on that project in amongst other things. As you know, many of you probably talked to Thomas. And like I say, he's a super smart cookie. And what he's put together is a very cool app that Zoom has now finally approved, which is good because it has to go through their app store, et cetera, et cetera. We're still not 100% happy with it. We're about 95% happy with it. Sounds like a COVID vaccine, doesn't it? We're 95% happy with it. And literally today, you're all being tested, by the way. You're all our beta examples. So an hour after this webinar concludes, Thomas's app is going to have a chat with Zoom and validate who attended, who didn't, that sort of thing. And we'll do some tagging through external activities via the campaign canvas, and then push you into some shared lists based on those who attended and those who were no-shows, for example. There's more to it. There's a lot more coming. That's just the real simple part. But there's some other cool things that Thomas has been able to build into that app that largely takes advantage of custom data objects. So we'll have more information for you, but thank you everybody for participating in the unknowingly in the test for us this afternoon, or in an hour or so. What is it, 11:55, 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. That covers everything, I think, on the agenda for this month. I appreciate you guys obviously making some time to be with us. We're happy to hang around if there are any more questions that you have, but just as an FYI, maybe more for our Northern Hemisphere friends, there is no user group held in December, but we will likely be back on deck in late January for the first user group for 2021. That typically takes place towards the very end of the month, probably after Australia Day at this stage, and it may not be on a Tuesday, but we'll keep you posted and get some invites out to you probably the middle to end of January very quickly. But if there are any questions, please let us know. In the interim, I wish everybody a Merry Christmas and season's greetings. It's probably feels a little bit early, but that's okay. It's the last chance we'll get to chat to you online. So have a wonderful break if you're taking time off. And we look forward to seeing you in the new year. Thanks again, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.